In the heart of West Africa, nestled between lush green hills and flowing rivers, lies the tranquil village of Ndebele. Known for its warm community, vibrant traditions, and the melodic sounds of drumming that echo through the air, Ndebele was a place where everyone knew everyone. It was here that Oki, a young woman known for her kindness and beauty, grew up. Oki, whose name means purpose, was the daughter of the village healer, Mama Jua, and the respected elder, Baba Ojo. From a young age, Oki had been the beacon of light in the village. She helped the elderly carry their loads, taught the younger children how to read, and sang with a voice so sweet that even the birds stopped to listen. As Oki blossomed into a young woman, her heart belonged to Mufasa, a spirited and passionate young man who was known for his bravery and his skill in crafting beautiful sculptures. Mufasa and Oki's love was the kind that stories are written about deep and genuine. They had dreamed of a life together, their futures intertwined like the roots of the ancient baobab tree that stood at the center of Ndebele. But life in the village was not always as simple as the whispering winds. Tradition held strong sway over personal desires, and it was decided by the village elders that Oki would marry Afram, the son of the village chief. Afram was handsome, wealthy, and his family held great power in Ndebele. Despite his stature, Afram had a reputation for being harsh and unforgiving, a stark contrast to Oki's gentle spirit. Oki's parents, while heartbroken for her, felt bound by tradition and duty. They believed that marrying Afram would bring prosperity and peace to their family. Reluctantly, Oki accepted her fate, choosing to honor her family's wishes and put the village's harmony above her own happiness. With only a few weeks left until the wedding, the village was abuzz with preparations. Colorful cloths were being dyed, elaborate dishes were being planned, and the rhythmic beats of drum rehearsals filled the air. Yet, amidst all the celebration, Oki's heart was heavy with sorrow. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of orange and purple, Oki met Mufasa by the river, where they had spent countless evenings together. They sat in silence, the weight of their unspoken words pressing down on them. Mufasa took Oki's hand in his eyes filled with anguish. Oki, I cannot stand by and watch you marry Afram, Mufasa whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. We were meant to be together. We belong to each other. Oki's eyes filled with tears. Mufasa, you know I have no choice. My family depends on this union. I cannot bring them dishonor. As they spoke, hidden in the shadows nearby, Afram's loyal servant, Obi, listened to every word. He had been ordered by Afram to keep an eye on Oki to ensure her loyalty. What he overheard that night would seal Oki's fate. The next day, rumors spread through the village like wildfire. People whispered behind closed doors and exchanged knowing glances. Afram, upon hearing of Oki's secret meeting with Mufasa, was enraged. His pride wounded and his anger boiling over, he confronted Oki. You will not make a fool of me, Afram hissed, his voice cold and menacing. If you cannot be faithful to me now, what hope is there for our future? Oki, trembling with fear, pleaded with Afram. I have done nothing wrong, Mufasa, and I only spoke of the past, of dreams that can no longer be. But Afram's heart was stone. He saw betrayal where there was none, and in his fury, he made a dark decision. The village must see Oki's punishment. She had to be made an example. Late that night, under the cover of darkness, a group of men led by Afram dragged Oki from her home. The village square, once a place of joy and celebration, became the scene of Oki's tragic end. Cries of horror and disbelief filled the air as Oki's lifeless body lay beneath the ancient baobab tree. the same tree under which she and Mufasa had once dreamed of their future. The village was thrust into mourning. Oki, the good girl, was gone. And as the days passed, the once vibrant Ndebele was shrouded in a pall of sorrow and fear. Mufasa, stricken with grief, vowed to uncover the truth and bring justice for Oki. He could not let her death be in vain. And so, under the shadow of the baobab tree, where Oki's spirit lingered, Mufasa prepared to face the darkness that had claimed her. The village of Ndebele, with its secrets and sorrows, awaited the unfolding of a story that was far from over. The sun rose over Ndebele, casting long shadows over the village that still mourned the loss of Oki. The vibrant colors of the village seemed dull, and the joyous drumming had given way to a somber silence. Mufasa, heartbroken and determined, stood before the baobab tree where Oki's life had been cruelly taken. He felt her presence in the rustling leaves, in the whispers of the wind, and vowed to uncover the truth and bring justice. Mufasa knew that taking on a Fram and the powerful forces behind him was dangerous. The village chief and his family had always ruled with an iron fist, and their influence stretched far beyond Ndebele. But Mufasa's love for Oki gave him courage. He couldn't let fear stop him from seeking the truth. He began his quest by visiting Oki's parents. Baba Ojo and Mama Ju were still in deep mourning, their eyes red from countless tears. Mufasa knelt before them, his voice soft but resolute. Baba, Mama, I need to know everything about that night, Mufasa said. Anything that could help me find out who was truly responsible for Oki's death. Mama Jua, clutching a tattered shawl that still carried Oki's scent, looked at Mufasa with weary eyes. We have only heard whispers, my son. They say Ephraim and his men were seen leaving our house that night. But who will believe us? Ephraim's family is powerful, and they will crush anyone who opposes them. Baba Ojo placed a reassuring hand on Mufasa's shoulder. You have our blessing to seek the truth, Mufasa. Oki's spirit will guide you, but be careful. The darkness in Ndebele runs deep. With their blessing, Mufasa began his search. He started with Obi, Ephraim's loyal servant, the one who had overheard the fateful conversation by the river. Obi was known to frequent the local tavern, a dimly lit place where secrets were exchanged over cups of palm wine. Mufasa found Obi in a corner of the tavern, nursing a drink. He approached cautiously, knowing that any direct confrontation could be dangerous. Instead, he chose to appeal to Obi's sense of guilt. Obi, Mufasa began, his voice low and steady. I know you were there that night. I know you heard what Oki and I spoke about. You must have known she was innocent. Obi looked up, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. Mufasa, you don't understand. A Fram is not someone you can defy. He would have killed me if I had told him the truth. Then help me now, Mufasa pleaded, for Oki's sake. Tell me what really happened. Obi sighed deeply, the weight of his secrets pressing down on him. Ephraim was furious when he heard about your meeting. He felt betrayed and decided that Oki had to pay for dishonoring him. That night, he and his men took her to the baobab tree. He made an example of her to show the village what happens when someone crosses him. Mufasa's blood boiled with anger, but he forced himself to remain calm. Thank you, Obi. This is just the beginning. Oki deserves justice, and I will see that she gets it. With Obi's confession, Mufasa had the first piece of the puzzle. But he knew he needed more to confront Ephraim and the chief. He turned to the village elders, hoping that their respect for justice would outweigh their fear of the chief's power. The elders gathered in the community hall, their faces lined with age and wisdom. Mufasa stood before them, his voice filled with determination. Elders of Ndebele, he began, Oki was a light in this village. Her death was not a matter of dishonor, but a result of cruelty and power. I have learned that Ephraim and his men were responsible. We must not allow such tyranny to go unpunished. The elders murmured amongst themselves, their faces grave. Elder Tund, the oldest and most respected among them, raised his hand for silence. Mufasa, we all mourn Oki, Tund said, his voice steady. But confronting Ephraim and the chief is no small matter. They wield great influence and have many allies. What you propose could lead to more violence and suffering for our people. I understand the risks, Elder Tund, Mufasa replied, but if we do nothing, we accept a life of fear and oppression. Oki's death cannot be in vain. We must stand together and demand justice. The elders exchanged thoughtful glances. After a long pause, Elder Tun spoke again. We will support you, Mufasa, but you must gather more evidence. Show us proof of Afram's guilt, and we will stand with you. With the elders' cautious support, Mufasa knew his next step was crucial. He needed to find solid evidence that could not be dismissed. He thought of Oki's friends, the ones who knew her best. They might have seen or heard something that could help. Mufasa sought out Amina, Oki's closest friend. Amina had been by Oki's side since childhood, sharing laughter and secrets. She had been devastated by Oki's death and had withdrawn from the village. Mufasa found Amina at her family's home, her eyes puffy from days of crying. She opened the door, her face lighting up with a glimmer of hope when she saw Mufasa. Mufasa, I'm so glad you're here, Amina said, her voice trembling. I've been so lost without Oki. Amina, I need your help, Mufasa said gently. Anything you know about Oki's final days could be the key to bringing justice. Amina nodded, her eyes filling with determination. Oki told me that she was afraid of Ephraim. She felt trapped and didn't know what to do. The night before she died, she gave me a letter. She said it was for you. Amina handed Mufasa a folded piece of paper, its edges worn from being held so tightly. Mufasa opened the letter, his hands shaking. Oki's familiar handwriting brought tears to his eyes as he read. My dearest Mufasa, if you're reading this, then I am no longer with you. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. My heart was always yours. Ephraim has threatened me and my family. I fear for our lives, but I cannot break my promise to them. I hope you can forgive me. Please, don't let my death be in vain. Find the truth and bring it to light. With all my love, Oki. Mufasa's resolve hardened. Oki's words were the spark he needed. Armed with her letter and the support of the village elders, he was ready to confront Ephraim and the chief. But as Mufasa prepared to expose the truth, a shadowy figure watched from the outskirts of the village. Afram's men were always close, and the danger was far from over. In the heart of the village, under the watchful eyes of the ancient baobab tree, Mufasa stood tall, with Oki's letter in his hand and the memories of their love fueling his resolve. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger. But he had no choice. Justice for Oki was his only goal. As Mufasa prepared for his next move, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of his vision, and the whispering leaves of the baobab tree spoke of unseen dangers. Afram's men were lurking, and they would not hesitate to strike if they sensed a threat to their master. Mufasa decided to gather more allies before making his next move. He sought out Quaim, a blacksmith whose strong arms had forged many of the village's tools and weapons. Quaim was known for his sense of justice and his deep respect for Oki. Mufasa, Quaim greeted him as he approached the forge. I heard what you're trying to do. Oki was like a sister to me. I'll stand by you. What do you need? I need to confront Ephraim with undeniable proof of his guilt, Mufasa replied. We have Oki's letter, but we need more. We need witnesses, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next. Quain nodded, his eyes fierce with determination. You can count on me. I'll talk to the others. There are many in the village who loved Oki and despised Ephraim's tyranny. We'll be ready when the time comes. As the sun set over Ndebele, casting long shadows across the village, Mufasa and Quain went to speak with more villagers. They visited the home of Adisa, a weaver whose tapestries adorned many homes. Adisa had been close to Oki, often sharing stories and songs while they worked. Adisa, Mufasa began, we need your help. Oki's death cannot be forgotten. We need to gather everyone who believes in justice and is willing to stand against Ephraim. Adisa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded firmly. Oki was a sister to all of us. I will help. I'll speak to the other women. We won't let her death be in vain. With each passing hour, more villagers joined Mufasa's cause. They were tired of living under Ephraim's oppressive rule, and Oki's unjust death had been the final straw. They were ready to stand up for what was right. That night, Mufasa met with the village elders once more. He presented Oki's letter and shared the growing support among the villagers. The elders, moved by the collective spirit of their people, agreed that the time had come to confront the chief. We must approach this carefully, Elder Tund advised. The chief will not take this lightly. We need to present our case in a way that cannot be ignored. Mufasa nodded, his resolve unwavering. Tomorrow, we gather at the village square. We will demand justice for Oki in front of everyone. Let the truth be seen by all. As dawn broke over Ndebele, the village buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread quickly, and the village square filled with people, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Mufasa stood at the center, flanked by Quain, Adisa, and a growing crowd of supporters. The chief and his council arrived, their expression stern and unyielding. Ephraim stood beside his father, his eyes narrowed with anger. He had heard whispers of Mufasa's efforts and was ready to crush any rebellion. Elder Tun stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. Chief, we have gathered here today to seek justice for Oki, the daughter of our village healer. Her death was not an accident or a matter of dishonor. It was a cruel act, and we have evidence to prove it. The chief frowned, his gaze shifting to Mufasa. What is this evidence you speak of? These are serious accusations. Mufasa stepped forward, holding Oki's letter high for all to see. This letter was written by Oki before her death. It speaks of the threats she faced from Ephraim. We have witnesses who can testify to Ephraim's actions on that fateful night. The crowd murmured, their voices rising in a wave of support for Mufasa. Ephraim's face twisted in rage, but he remained silent, his father's stern gaze keeping him in check. We demand that Ephraim be held accountable for his actions, Mufasa continued, his voice unwavering. Oki's life was taken unjustly, and we cannot allow such tyranny to continue in our village. The chief looked troubled, his eyes darting between Mufasa and his son. He knew that ignoring the growing unrest could lead to more conflict, but supporting his son could lead to an uprising. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Finally, Elder Tun spoke again. We ask that a council be formed to investigate these claims thoroughly. Let the truth come to light, and let justice be served according to our traditions. The chief nodded slowly, his face grim. Very well. A council will be formed. The truth will be sought, and justice will be done. But know this. Those who disrupt the peace of our village will be dealt with harshly. The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Some cheered, while others looked fearful of the potential consequences. But Mufasa felt a glimmer of hope. The first step had been taken. The council would investigate, and with the truth on their side, they had a chance to bring justice for Oki. As the meeting dispersed, Mufasa felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Obi, Afram's servant, standing there with a look of desperation. "Mufasa, I need to talk to you," Obi said urgently. "There's more you need to know. Afram, he's planning something. Something dangerous." Mufasa's heart pounded. "What is it, Obi? Tell me everything." Obi glanced around nervously, then leaned in close. "Afram is gathering his men. He's planning to take action before the council can meet. He wants to silence you and anyone who stands with you." Fear gripped Mufasa, but he pushed it aside. "We have to be ready. We need to protect ourselves and make sure the council sees the truth before Afram can act." With Obi's warning, Mufasa knew that the fight was far from over. The path to justice was fraught with danger, but with the village behind him, he was prepared to face whatever came next. The village of Ndebele was a place of quiet whispers and hidden fears. As Mufasa and his allies prepared for the coming storm, they knew that the next few days would be crucial. Afram's threats loomed large, but the spirit of Oki and the promise of justice drove them forward. Mufasa gathered the village's key supporters in a secret meeting at Quaim's forge. The flickering light from the forge cast long shadows on the faces of those gathered, reflecting the seriousness of their situation. "We need to protect ourselves and gather more evidence before the council meets," Mufasa began, his voice steady but urgent. "Obi has warned us that Afram is planning something. We must be ready." Quaim nodded, his strong hands clenched into fists. "We'll keep watch tonight. I've spoken to the other men, and they're ready to defend the village if it comes to that." Adisa, standing beside Mufasa, spoke softly but firmly. "We must also protect our families. The women and children should stay indoors. We will not let fear rule us, but we must be wise." Obi, still trembling from his decision to betray Afram, added, "I'll do whatever I can to help. I know where Afram and his men meet. We can catch them off guard if we move quickly." As the plan took shape, a sense of unity and purpose spread through the group. They knew that their fight was not just for Oki, but for the soul of their village. That night, Mufasa and a group of villagers, armed with nothing more than their determination and simple tools, patrolled the village. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle of the wind seemed to carry a warning. Near midnight, a faint sound reached Mufasa's ears, a muffled shout, quickly silenced. He motioned for the others to follow as they crept towards the sound. They arrived at a clearing where Afram and his men were gathered, their faces lit by the flickering flames of a small fire. Afram was speaking, his voice low and menacing. "We will strike before dawn. Mufasa and his friends think they can challenge us, but we will show them who truly holds power in Ndebele." Mufasa, hiding behind a cluster of bushes, clenched his fists. He knew that now was the time to act. He signaled to Quaim and the others, and they moved forward, their steps silent and purposeful. In a sudden rush, they surrounded Afram and his men. The surprise on Afram's face quickly turned to fury as he realized he had been caught off guard. "Mufasa," Afram snarled, stepping forward. "You think you can stand against me? Against my family?" Mufasa stood tall, his eyes locked on Afram. "This is not about power, Afram. This is about justice. For Oki, and for the village you have terrorized." Afram laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You are a fool. You have no idea what you are up against." Before Afram could react, Quaim and the other men stepped in, disarming Afram's followers and restraining them. The village's resolve was stronger than the fear that Afram had tried to instill. With Afram and his men subdued, Mufasa turned to the group. Take them to the village square. Let everyone see what they have planned. As dawn broke, the village gathered once more in the square. This time, the air was filled with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The council of elders arrived, their expressions grave as they took their places. Elder Tun stood at the center, his voice echoing through the square. Today we gather to witness the truth. Afram and his men have been caught plotting against the peace of our village. They will answer for their actions. Afram, now restrained and defiant, glared at Mufasa. This changes nothing. My family will crush you all. Mufasa stepped forward, holding Oki's letter once more. Afram, this village will no longer be ruled by fear. Oki's words speak louder than your threats. We will seek justice, and the truth will prevail. The elders examined the letter and listened to the testimonies of Obi, Adisa, and others who had witnessed Afram's cruelty. Their faces grew more stern with each passing moment. Finally, Elder Tun spoke, his voice filled with authority. Afram, you have brought dishonor upon your family and this village. Your actions have led to the death of an innocent, and you have plotted further violence. You will be stripped of your title and exiled from Ndebele. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Exile was the severest punishment, a fate worse than death for one who thrived on power and influence. Afram's face twisted in rage and fear. You cannot do this. My father is the chief. He will. Elder Tund raised his hand, silencing Afram. The council's decision is final. The chief's power does not extend to shielding such dishonor. The chief, watching his son's downfall, remained silent. His face was a mask of grief and resignation. He knew that his son's actions had left him with no defense. As Afram and his men were led away, the village began to stir with a renewed sense of hope. Oki's death had not been in vain. Her spirit had inspired the people of Ndebele to stand together and seek justice. Mufasa, exhausted but triumphant, stood with his friends and allies. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. The village had reclaimed its light. Elder Tund approached Mufasa, placing a hand on his shoulder. You have shown great courage, Mufasa. Oki would be proud of you. Mufasa nodded, his eyes filled with tears. We did this for her, and for the future of our village. In the days that followed, Ndebele began to heal. The baobab tree, once a silent witness to tragedy, now stood as a symbol of resilience and unity. The village returned to its vibrant self, but with a new understanding of justice and the strength that comes from standing together. Mufasa visited Oki's grave, a simple but beautiful place adorned with wildflowers and the carved figures that Mufasa had once made for her. He knelt by the grave, his heart full of both sorrow and peace. We did it, Oki, he whispered. Your spirit will always be with us, and we will never forget you. As he rose and walked back to the village, Mufasa felt the warmth of the sun on his face and the promise of a new beginning. Ndebele would continue to thrive, its people forever changed by the courage of a young woman who had loved deeply and lived with purpose. And so, the story of Oki, the village good girl, became a legend in Ndebele, a tale of love, loss, and the unyielding pursuit of justice that would inspire generations to come.